Good morning. So today I'm wanting to speak about the last section of the Genjo Koan. It's, can't believe it, we're almost through. But before we go to the last section, I'd like to connect with the last sentence of the previous section. Dogen says, when a person engages in practice enlightenment in the Buddha way, as the person realizes one Dharma, the person permeates that Dharma. As the person encounters one practice, the person fully practices that practice. Here is the way, here the path unfolds. This is the place, here the way unfolds. I mean, there's different translations. So, Dogen maybe gives he gives us a clear but maybe disappointing vision of practice. Because maybe we want him to say, when a person engages in practice enlightenment in the Buddha way, as the person realizes one Dharma, the person permeates the Dharma. But he just says, when a person realizes one Dharma, the person permeates that Dharma. And I just want to remind you, the word Dharma has various meanings, but the way it's used here is as a unit of experience. It's a unique, never repeated appearance now that we are experiencing. So you could say it's a moment. But moment here doesn't mean it's a unit of clock time. A Dharma is experiential time. It's like, look, this. So Dogen says when a person practices one Dharma, meaning this Dharma here and now, that person permeates that Dharma. So what might be disappointing about this vision of practice is that you are never done. And you're not done in two ways, like he's engaging two, from his point of view, mistaken understandings of practice. You are not done before you practice, like we're all Buddhas already, therefore we don't have to practice, which was a common view in his time. And we can get into that a little bit more. But we're also not practicing to achieve a special experience called enlightenment, and then when we are enlightened, we are done with practice. That would be when a person practices thoroughly, this person realizes the Dharma, in which case you're done. And this is a view in certain schools, it's like after enlightenment you are enlightened, you're an enlightened Buddha, and there's no need to practice. Or you can reduce your practice, or practice will be, happening in a different way. In our ordination ceremony, it specifically says, will you continue to hold these precepts even after achieving enlightenment? And it's like, or attaining Buddhahood, and then you'll say, dutifully, you say, yes, I will. Yeah, but it's that kind of understanding. You're not done. Here is the place. Here the way unfolds. So I've emphasized this throughout the discussion of this text. Our practice and our enlightenment, which Dogen doesn't separate. So it's expressed here in this phrase, when a person engages in practice enlightenment. We do not practice in order to achieve enlightenment. As if practice is a process and enlightenment is the result. This is, for Dogen, this is an unacceptable dualism. Because it postpones enlightenment. So he speaks about practice enlightenment because our practice is, I'm trying to present this understanding, our practice is the expression of enlightenment. Enlightenment gets actualized in our practice, and we practice to express this enlightenment. And it's, if you reread this text or restudy it, hopefully for the rest of your life, all these sections are a commentary on the title, Genjo Koan. And so just to recall, for those of you who weren't here, or for all of us to be clear about, Genjo means to complete that which appears. So that which appears is this Dharma now. And the practice is to complete it. And Koan means simultaneously unique and universal. So we complete that which appears as simultaneously unique and universal. So again, what does this mean? Unique means here is this unrepeatable, particular moment in our life, and it's selective. It's like you see this and not that. You hear this and not that. You are engaged with this situation and not that situation. And yet, each of those particular engagements are an expression of the totality of being. I don't know if this is any comfort to you, but hopefully the relaxation or the ease that should come from this, rather philosophical understanding that this moment is an expression of the totality of all being, is that the position, the situation that you are in with your particular life is completely okay. It's not that there is something missing about your existence. Your existence is a full expression of the totality of being. This is a very kind vision of each person. And not just each person, each being. We don't have to struggle to become something else. The vision is to fully engage what we are at this moment and let the way unfold from here. And this unfolding, I think, in my understanding, doesn't have to be a struggle. It is an unfolding together with all other beings. So, as I discussed with a student yesterday in a one-on-one meeting, she said to me, well, this door is closed and this door opens, and this is a pretty Taoist, I don't know if she was aware of it, but a pretty Taoist understanding of living your life. It's like you go where the door opens. You don't go where the door closes. there's a process that unfolds. In my life, it feels like this. Don't force something if the door doesn't want to open. Maybe it doesn't want to open yet, or maybe it never wants to open. You don't know why it doesn't open. It's not opening. Like let's say you have a crush on someone, and you want to be in a relationship, and the person says no to you. This becomes a crushing crush. It's like, no. The door closes. Then you can be deeply disappointed for the rest of your life that you weren't able to convince this person to be with you. Right? But another view is like, why would you want to be with a person who doesn't want to be with you? Why would you want to have a job with people who don't want to give you that job? Why would you want to do an activity that you're not that good at? I don't know, any version of this. Relax. The door closed. Find a different door to go through. There are many doors to go through. Not this one. What's so bad about that? I know I'm making fun of, pretty existential problems. And not fun of, but make light of. But it's important. So Genjo Koan is, and I've said this before, and I'm just setting the stage for the discussion of this last section, is how do you complete that which appears? And in my view, there's a spatial dimension to completing that which appears, and there is a temporal dimension. In the spatial dimension is we make space for what is. If you want to understand this in a more, you could say, psychological way, maybe we practice acceptance. But from how I study the mind, it's deeper than accepting in the sense of like, yeah, it's okay. Like as if you say, it's okay. It's deeper than that. It's more existential. It is already the way it is. You don't have a choice. And your mind, which isn't inside your body, but it is that which allows this appearance to appear. Right? We're looking at our mind because this is what appears in the mind. This world. Our mind, this awareness, is already capable of allowing things to be the way they are. We're adding grasping and resisting. We're adding our desire for things to be different than they are, but our starting point is already being within the way it is. It's not like we have to make that happen. The practice of making space is to let go of resistance and grasping and discover that the field of awareness is always already hosting or not even separate from reality as it is. So that's completing that which appears in the sense that you make space for it. By making space for it, you realize that it's already complete. But this is just one side of the coin of completing. The other side is that everything is time. Everything is activity. Nothing is stable and inert. If you say like it's already complete, then like, okay, now we're done. But no, life goes on. Things change. The wind is still blowing. The leaves are moving. The cars are driving. It's not stopping and then you can say, oh, now I'm in this place of completeness. This is a complication, you could say, with the sense of completeness. On the one hand, it's already complete, and on the other hand, it's always incomplete. Why? Because we need to continue to participate in the activity that life is. You can't stand aside and say, like, it's complete. No. Each moment is asking you to respond, to do something. So that's what I call the dimension of time in completing that which appears. How do we complete that which appears? Carrying the present into the present, as I like to say. Because you're not I said this many times, you're not going into the future. You are actualizing the next moment that is present. You see? How do you do it? Well, that's also disappointing. There's no answer to that. The answer comes from doing it. You can't stand aside and once and for all know or say what the right response is. Because the right response depends on this particular situation. And so our life is actually put completely... We know this already, folks. There's nothing new about this. Our life is happening now, and we are put on the spot now, every time, for the rest of our lives. And it seems to me that Dogen is just saying, yeah, exactly. But he's saying more. He's saying that we have the support of all beings, of all of space. This is always coming together to support us. And our job is to use that support and carry the present into the present in an appropriate way that recognizes, the dignity and value of all other beings that participate in this moment. Okay, so then, he tells this story in this last section. Zen master Baoche of Mount Magu was waving a fan. He's just, doing this is all, he's just waving a fan. And a monk, it's hot. He's waving a fan. A monk approached him and asked, "The nature of the wind is ever present and permeates everywhere. Why are you waving a fan?" The master said, "You know only the wind's nature is ever present. You don't know that it permeates everywhere." The monk said, "How does wind permeate everywhere?" The master just continued waving the fan. The monk bowed deeply. Okay. This is a pretty simple story. And I think it's fairly simple to understand. I think it's important to know that the nature of the wind here stands for Buddha nature. And waving the fan stands for practice. But it doesn't just stand for practice in a spiritual or religious sense. it stands for every action of our life. In the sense that as a serious practitioner, you make every action of your life your practice. Yes, there is Zazen practice, which is our practice, but there may be other practices that you do. The monk engages in the practice of bowing, and I'll talk about that at the end. But it is every practice, every action that can become our practice. So right now, my practice is speaking, and your practice is listening. Right? So the question is, if you want to look at it, in what way is this practice? You can ask yourself, how does it become a practice? So, the monk says the nature of the wind is ever present and it permeates everywhere, which picks up the idea that all beings have Buddha nature. And that Buddha nature permeates all existence. And then this is not a stupid question to then say, like, if everything is already Buddha nature, why are you waving a fan? Why are you practicing? Why are you making a big effort to get somewhere where you already are? You understand? Suzuki Roshi is quoted, quite widely with, all of you are Buddhas just as you are, and there's room for improvement. Okay? Same dynamic. You are Buddhas, already Buddhas the way you are. And then you could ask yourself, then why is there any need for any improvement? And then he says, paradoxically, and there's room for improvement. So this is the same question. And Dogen is said to have had that question as the most animating problem of his practice. And that has to do, I think, with the historical situation, because he grew up in an environment where this everyone is already a Buddha was the teaching of the day, let's say. He said, how can this be true? Because then we would all give up practicing, like there would be no need to make an effort. And the truth is, and we need to see this as an existential problem, when you don't practice, you are not just a Buddha. You are depriving yourself of a transformative dynamic in your life. You're deluding yourself by saying, like, hey, I don't have to, there's no need for me to practice, I'm already a Buddha. Okay, well, you can have that view, but it's not going to be true. Dogen knew that wasn't true, so he questioned that teaching and said, like, this is a problem, right? I need to understand this better. And the master said, you only know that the wind's nature is ever present, that Buddha nature exists. But you don't know that, or maybe we could say how it permeates everywhere. And then the monk, he's alert. It's like he says, so how does the wind permeate everywhere? And the master just fans himself. Well, one lesson from he's just fanning himself, and I'm just verbalizing this for all of us because I think it's obvious, is that the way Buddha nature gets actualized is not through conceptual understanding. He's not giving an explanation. It is actualized through embodied action. And this embodied action is necessary. And then it says, the monk bowed deeply. Now, you are probably, most of us are likely to understand bowing deeply as a gesture of reverence of the monk to the master. Thank you, Master, for giving this profound teaching of continuing to fan yourself. And I think that is a very shallow understanding. What the monk is getting is that he has to join the master in embodied action. So this is the first thing. This bow is embodied action. It is not continuing the discussion. Okay, that's one. And then there's a depth and subtlety in bowing that only those know who engage in the practice of bowing. You can have an idea about what bowing is and whether you like it or not, but if you don't practice for decades bowing, you don't know what bowing is. But this monk does know bowing because he's practiced it. We have to assume for, a considerable amount of time. Okay, so Mike, maybe you can zoom out a bit, because I'm going to stand up and bow. So maybe in this way that everyone can see. Right? Bowing is a posture. First you establish an upright posture, and then you bend your body. So there's a full prostration, but I'm not going to demonstrate that. And you bend your body. Okay. How you bend your body makes a big difference. Bowing is not this. But many people bow that way. You could say that's still a gesture of reverence. Okay, so I'm going to turn this way. When you bow and your weight goes this way, a portion of your body has to go back if you go forward. If you go forward, and when I teach this, I speak about the kidneys have to go back. And there's a simple test. If you bow with the kidneys not going back, which I'm doing right now, you're out of balance. If somebody gives me a push from the back, I'm falling over. So to do a correct bow, you have to push your kidneys back and distribute your weight in such a way that the weight roots you into the earth. You have to do that, or else your bow is not correct. It's not integrated. It's not integrated with the physicality and the way it works. It's not integrated with gravity. It's not integrated with the anatomy of your body or your physiology, or whatever word we want to put there. There is a way that we can move in the world that relates us, as like a Taoist would say, to heaven and earth. And the way, when the bow is correct, relates you to the earth is that your energy is rooting you deep. I mean, it feels that way. Energy goes down into the earth, and as a result, you are supported by the earth. This is the same. If you go forward, something has to go back. If you go down, something will come up. If you root your energy into the earth will exchange energy with you. This sounds pretty woo-woo, I'm sorry. But energy just means a flow of sensation. You can feel a flow of sensation that feels like it's going down, and as a counterbalance to that, you can feel a flow of sensation that comes up. And it feels like you are nourished by the earth. I'm not saying I have no idea what happens, really. I'm not saying there's some mysterious energy called chi that's flowing, but that's how it is described. And it feels that way. It does feel more nourishing than being unaware of your posture and just walking around you don't feel that you are rooted in the earth and that you are held. That is an experiential difference, and you find that out by engaging the practice of bowing over some time, and the monk did that. So when it says, when we are pointed to away from conceptualization to embodied action. Embodied action doesn't just mean like moving the body around, it means that too. But it means the subtle energetic action that comes from, that is always co-present with our physical action. And there is a way that this subtle energetic action is integrated with heaven and earth, with space. So the monk, in understanding what the master is saying by fanning himself, demonstrates that. Oh, I know this in the practice of bowing, so I'm engaging it in this practice of bowing. Now there's a curious, just to extend a little bit the discussion of bowing. When you bow in this way, and you get your head out of this upright axis, but maintain integrity, thinking stops. You can try it out. It just stops. You'd have to make an effort to continue to think. So next time you bow, if that is your practice, just put your mind sort of into this sort of, out of the corner of your mind's eye, just observe where the thinking stops. It does. That's another interesting connection here, subtle connection. It's like getting out of conceptualization and into an embodied posture where thinking stops, or you could say becomes secondary. Suzuki Roshi says, and this is one of my favorite quotes, I use it all the time. He said, "To stop the mind does not mean to stop the contents of mind. It means your mind pervades your whole body." And in the practice of bowing, or other practices of like using your body in an integrated way, your mind pervades your whole body. The body is suffused with attention. And when the body is suffused with attention, thinking stops. And not in some absolute way of like, you will never have a thought again. Or that as if there is not some kind of background, maybe thinking activity. But the thinking stops in the sense that you are not identified with it. You are now present in your body, and that means you're not identified with your thinking. You don't have to. Because you have, this is a new way of using have, you have yourself without trying to have yourself through thought. Because we don't have ourselves, we're trying to get to ourselves by way of thinking. But when you have yourself by being this embodied presence, thinking is completely secondary. You can use it, but you don't need it. This is also what is in this gesture of bowing and the monk's understanding. So then it's interesting, right? The story is simple, but it opens up into this embodied practice that Zen is. That is understood by those who are doing the practice. maybe one last, I think, last comment here. Bowing here also then means appropriate engagement. It's appropriate engagement with heaven and earth, and is appropriate engagement between student and teacher. I guess he could do something else, but the custom is to bow, so that's appropriate engagement. And then we can use that as a model for any action that we take in life. What is appropriate engagement in any situation? Okay, like I said before, there's no general answer to that. We find out. But we find out when we do the practice of the mind penetrates the whole body. Okay. Then Dogen continues, the genuine experience of Buddha Dharma and the vital path that has been correctly transmitted are like this. I'm always stunned, like Buddhism is so complicated. It's like, here you have like 2,500 years of teachings. I picked up the Flower Garland Sutra today, and it's like, English translation, 3 volumes, and it goes on and on about this and that and the other thing. I was like, geez. Then Dogen tells one story about the master, and then he says, the genuine experience of Buddha Dharma and the vital path of its transmission is just like this. So it's like, study this example. It's all in here. What a relief, but then also, can this be true? To say we should not wave a fan because the nature of the wind is ever present, and that we should feel the wind even when we don't wave a fan, is to know neither ever-presence nor the wind's nature. Okay, so he's pointing out the misunderstandings for us that were prevalent in his time and I think continue. To say we should not wave a fan because the nature of the wind is ever present, to say you do not need to practice because Buddha nature is already there, is a mistake. And that we should feel the wind even when we don't wave a fan. Same it's like Suzuki Roshi in his commentary says, what's the difference between the guy who's waving a fan and the guy who's not waving a fan? He says, one is very hot and the other one is cool. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. I like this story. This is a story that's sort of a cultural cliche almost, right? It's the guy is like, there's a flood and the guy is on top of the roof and helicopter comes and he says, oh no, God's going to save me. Go away, helicopter. Helicopter comes again. Hey, flood it's higher now. You want to come in? No, God's going to save me. And then, 3 times, of course, because of a joke. And then he drowns, and then he's in heaven, and then it turns out God sent the helicopter. Okay. But it's like that. Now, what I think is interesting about the story with the helicopter is that it's still passive in that story. You need to, what the depth of the story, I think, is that God is not divorced from the tangible reality of our lives. I mean, this is why we laugh about this person, because he's separating God, some principle, some divine power, from the concreteness of his experience. But the story still suggests that you can sit on your roof and wait for a helicopter because God is sending a helicopter to save you. I think Dogen doesn't have that understanding. It's not passive. You need to wave a fan. It's your participation, your activity is the way Buddha nature manifests itself. The historical understanding of Buddha nature is something like all beings have the potential to become Buddhas. This is, again, a very kind, universal, inclusive vision of human beings and of life. All beings have Buddha nature. And the image that goes with that is, and I think Chogyam Trungpa expressed this as basic goodness, basically. It's like there's basic goodness in everything. It's like a jewel or a diamond that's covered in dirt, in layers of dirt. And practice is to peel back the layers, and then you find the shining, sparkling diamond at the core. And I don't think that's a particularly Buddhist image. I think most religious practices that we are aware of are something like, you're basically good if you didn't stray from that goodness all the time, you'd be fine. But you are straying. You're sinful. There are afflictions. You have dysfunctional habits. There's something wrong with you. And if you correct that stuff, you return to the basic goodness, to the jewel in you, to your, relationship with God. Anyway, I'm just broadening this, right? So this image isn't particularly Buddhist. It's like it's a general human, pretty universal human idea. And is it correct, though? Is this a good way to understand life? Dogen is completely opposed to this. Just make no mistake. He doesn't tolerate the dualism of of sin and salvation, of being mired in affliction and liberation into Buddhahood. If you remember, earlier in the Genjo Koan, he says, those who have great realization of delusion are Buddhas. One way to read this is, you will not get away from delusion. What you can do is have great realization of delusion. You can understand delusion more and more deeply, and you can see through it. And most importantly, you can stop being identified with that which is called delusion here. And I've mentioned this at the time. You can be, every conception is delusion. Every framing that you put around reality is delusion, because it's always less than reality. There's always more than what you can think or know about the world. So everything we think or know or have a view about is already delusion. But if you believe in your limited views, then you are what Dogen calls deluded within delusion. But if you act with your opinions and views and actions, knowing that it is limited and that this is not reality, then you start to sort of peer through what is inevitably our delusion, and you start to see that there's a depth. And Dogen calls that starting to see through it. He calls that Buddha. Buddhas are those who have great realization of delusion, but they're not deluded about realization. They don't believe that they can eradicate delusion. They don't believe that the dirt just has to be peeled away to uncover the diamond. There's another image which is the mirror and dust, which is a famous Zen image. It's like there's this mirror, but it's full of dust. Practice is to remove the dust from the mirror so that the mirror can reflect the world in an undistorted way, clear way. Is it true, though? Is this the correct description of practice? And I think Dogen's understanding is, maybe we can use another image that I've used throughout this discussion, is the waves and the water. All beings are the waves on the ocean of being. So there's the wind of delusion that separates everyone into waves. Everyone separates the totality of being into separateness. And practice is to recognize, to stop identifying with being a wave and recognizing that we're all water. Yeah? But this idea of practice still maintains a dualism, like we have to stop being a wave and return to being water. But Dogen says something like, to be a wave is the inevitable expression of being water. You will be a wave and always are a wave. Your practice is to affirm that and simultaneously know that you are water. So famously, Dogen switched the expression all beings have Buddha nature to all beings are the Buddha nature. It's like this appearance right now, all these innumerable waves of the ocean are the Buddha nature. Your existence right now is this ocean of water and waves. I want to give this one more twist. Sorry it's taking so long. My understanding is that there are no Buddha persons. There are only Buddha moments. I think that's a kind view too. Kind to yourself and kind to others. Because it essentially what this says is Buddha moments are available to everyone. And you could say if someone has the ability to realize one Buddha moment after another, maybe that person could justifiably be called a Buddha person. But if that person starts to think of themselves as a Buddha person, they're already an ordinary being. Dogen has pointed this out before. Because if you identify with your ability to produce Buddha moments as now a quality that you possess, you're already making a big mistake. So it is good, I think, to just release the idea of the Buddha person, of trying to transform yourself into someone else. You can just remain yourself and direct your practice at, I don't know if these words make any sense, generate Buddha moments. And how do you generate a Buddha moment? You generate a Buddha moment by two things: non-reactivity and responsibility. Non-reactivity means to let go of grasping and resisting. I'm just circling back to what I said in the beginning. We allow everything to be exactly as it is at this time. This is making space. This is removing grasping. I want this to stay on longer, or I want this to stop earlier, as if you could take away the time of a certain process and say, because I don't like it, it shouldn't happen. So this attitude of just sitting, which is the core of our Soto Zen practice, is, as I say all the time, to allow your experience to be exactly what it is at this time. How do you do it? You make space for it. You recognize your mind's ability, your awareness's ability to host things exactly as they are. The practice of non-reactivity and of allowing, of making space. And then there's the practice of responsibility, which is taking appropriate action, responding appropriately. We have that ability. It's like find it in yourself. Find in yourself the ability to work with the situation as it is, which requires openness. Don't rely only on your preconceived ideas. Maybe new ways of doing things have to come into the situation that you're not aware of. You are maintaining an open mind in this way to engage. By engaging the situation fully, you are discovering your ability to respond, your responsibility. And that play with words is, by discovering our responsibility, we are enacting our responsibility. This is our responsibility, to act wholeheartedly in the situation that we're in. It's often if you're too idealistic, you're trying to do things all over the world and you're neglecting your own life. This is not sustainable. As many people are finding out, this leads to burnout. Maybe a nice fantasy, but it is not a good understanding of responsibility. You do need to keep your life in order to extend your energy to a larger realm. We can say both are necessary to fulfill your full humanity, but it starts with getting your own life in order. Finding your feet on the ground, finding that integration, or else you will run out of energy. And also out of clarity. You will run out of clarity. Clarity comes from sensing yourself in an integrated way between heaven and earth in this situation, not all over the place. So, Buddha nature is actualized as this Buddha moment by letting go of grasping and resisting and finding your responsibility, the workability of each situation. And when you miss that, which happens all the time, because we're not Buddha persons, we are ordinary people practicing Buddha moments. When it happens, you return. And your Zazen practice is something like, every day you understand it's a healthy thing to return to allowing your experience to be exactly what it is. This baseline, 40 minutes a day in the morning, you do that. And that's a way, in a practical way, to speak about what Dogen says. You're never done. You are enacting enlightenment with your practice. Okay. Then the last sentence in the text is, since the wind's nature is ever present, the wind of the Buddha family enables us to realize the gold of the earth, of the great earth, and to transform the water of the long river into cream. Sounds like paradise. It is, because it's an image of nirvana. But nirvana, again, not as some other realm, but as a nirvanic moment, as I like to say, as a Buddha moment, as a nirvana moment. You see, this is so interesting. The earth is an image of space, and the river is an image of time. Again here, space and time. Realizing the spatiality of your mind together with all beings it has a transformative quality, and turning space into a precious experience like gold. Sometimes it's Dogen has another fascicle that talks about the bright pearl. It's like the luminosity of the present fully experienced is a bright pearl. It turns the great earth into gold. There is a sheen to it, a beautiful vitality that is picked up in this image. And it transforms the long river into cream. And the long river shows up in the Avatamsaka Sutra, and which I've mentioned before, which is this supposedly this big volumes of Mahayana teachings. The water of the long river supposedly is milk. But here it's turned into cream or cheese in some other translation. It contains practice is necessary for transformation. Practice is turning milk into cream or milk into cheese. Since the wind's nature is ever present, we don't have to do anything about that. This is already the case. The wind of the Buddha's family, which is the fan, your practice, enables this transformation. That's how Dogen concludes the fascicle. Enlightenment, the ever-present nature of the wind, and practice, this Buddha family's wisdom of how to engage reality, produce this transformation, which I think is useful to understand as, how is this moment a Buddha moment? For you, for each of us. Not in some abstract way, but, very concretely, like, rooted into the earth when you are doing a bow. How you engage an emotion when it arises. How you are a sexual being in this world, because you can't escape that without causing harm or creating some crazy dissatisfaction in your life. All of those things that aren't some detached aspiration, but the concrete challenges of being a human being. All of those things are included. All of those things are the nature of the wind. How do you fan yourself and be the cool person and not the hot person? Thank you very much.